hold the mic. All right. Hey there. Good. How about you? It's a good view from up here. I expect all the questions to be questions that are practical.
I don't know if we just wanted to.
The one about security already came up,
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be too many questions.
and the one about water already came up.
Your guys' mic's working? This is. Thanks.
Check, 1, 2. Check, 1, 2. There you go.
You guys
Check.
ready to rock? I get started. I don't know unless we're supposed to give us a high sign. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Good morning, everyone. We're just going to grab the bull by its horns and roll into the second panel. This is a panel about local, state, and federal legislation and compliance. We've got a great list of panelists with us. Briefly, my name is Niccolo de Luca. I work at a firm called Townsend Public Affairs, and we have the esteemed pleasure of representing Imperial County in Sacramento. I really want to tip my cap to the supervisor for all of his work and leadership on this very important policy topic. I want to thank all the sponsors for all of their work in supporting this summit. It's really, really impressive seeing everybody here today. And in about 3 months, we're going to ask for all of your help to work on some state legislation that Patrick and I are working on, so you guys can help us get the message to Sacramento and statewide how important hemp is and how we need some legislation to allow us to move forward. So, with that said, I'm going to ask the panelists to each introduce themselves, give us a little bit of a blurb about what they do, and then we've got some questions that we're going to go through, and if time permits, we'd love some questions from the audience. So, with that said, Josh, take it from here.
All right. Sounds good. Hopefully everybody can hear me. So my name is Joshua Kress. I'm the branch chief for the pest exclusion branch for the California Department of Food and Agriculture. I oversee basically plant pest exclusion, so anything dealing with plant pests. And since we first started working on in 2017 on industrial hemp, I've also been either overseeing or directly involved with our work regarding industrial hemp and our program to try to work with the commissioners to provide industrial hemp registration. Generally speaking, for the work that we do, we really appreciate and work directly with the county agricultural commissioners. I'm glad that Carlos is here up here with me to address things from their perspective, because they're really the ones that do all the work for us. They're the boots on the ground. And so we've been working very, very hard with Carlos and all the other commissioners to keep things going for hemp. And that's all I got.
Good morning. My name is Patrick Goggin. It's good to be back in Imperial County. I'm an attorney. I've been working on hemp issues going back to the late 90s. I was involved in an early seminal case in the early 2000s when the DEA was attempting to ban hemp foods because it has trace quantities of THC. The industry decided to challenge that those rules in the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco, and I had the opportunity to serve as local counsel. And I'm here to say that we pushed back on the DEA, and the court sided with us, and for the first time coined non-psychoactive hemp when we still had a definition, when hemp was still falling under the definition of marijuana. I later ended up working with then Assembly Member Leno, and together with other legislators in working hemp legislation in the state, starting in 2005, and it took us to get past 3 vetoes to finally getting to a signature in 2013 by Governor Brown. We got vetoed by both Arnold and Jerry. So we're happy we finally got through that. I joined the Vote Hemp board. It's a national advocacy arm of the industry back in 2005. I'm now senior attorney with a firm called the Hoban Law Group based out of Denver. I'm basically our San Francisco office. I've helped to co-found the California Hemp Council. It just started this year. It's pushing hemp policy in Sacramento. If anybody wants to talk about that afterwards, it's an industry-funded effort, and we need your support. There's a lot of work to be done up in Sacramento, and something that I've been really talking a lot about this year is the fact that California is incredibly important to this movement. It's essentially the 5th largest economy in the world. The rest of the country looks to California for its leadership on environmental issues, agricultural issues, and it's really going to be looking to California on hemp because of the girth and size of our agricultural economy. So, but really quickly, I was down here with Chris Boucher and others in the mid 2000s, late 2000s, and I want to say that the Imperial County Farm Bureau was one of the first farm bureaus in the state to back the relegalization of industrial hemp in the state. So this is an important county. Thank you.
Patrick, thank you very much. Carlos, if you could introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Carlos Ortiz. I'm Agricultural Commissioner of Imperial County. Like Joshua Kress mentioned, we work very closely with California Department of Food and Agriculture. And my office is going to be handling the cultivation of hemp at the local level. We're going to be receiving the applications from the growers. We're going to review the applications, review the cultivars, make sure that they're approved. And we're also going to look into the sites where the hemp is going to be cultivated. We're going to be involved in sampling and sending the sample to the laboratory. And then we'll also have oversight on the harvest and also if there's a need for destruction and the destruction. My office also handles various other programs like pesticide use enforcement. So at our booth, if you have any questions on pesticides that may be applied to hemp, please visit our booth. And also my office does weights and measures, so if there's going to be any selling of hemp over commercial scales, commercial transactions, my office will be also involved. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jim Minnick, and I am the Planning Director for the County of Imperial. We regulate all of the land use in the county, which would include locations for cultivation, manufacturing, distribution of hemp. And one more thing, this is a really good view. We can see everywhere from up here. So we're watching if you're not paying attention in the back row in the white shirt there. I saw that. That's pretty cool. So we're going to maybe start a wave before we're done. I want to make sure you guys are all awake. So thank you.
That was great. Thank you very much. Okay, so what we're going to do is go through some questions that are obviously aimed at our panelists, but more importantly, I think it's going to be a very helpful roadmap for all of you who are interested in making sure Imperial County and the overall hemp movement is able to move forward successfully. So the first question, it's going to go to Patrick, and then after that, each panelist can add in. What is going on at the federal and state level as it relates to hemp, and what can we do collectively and individually to make sure Imperial County and other parts of the state benefit? So Patrick, with that.
Okay, so look, the way I like to coin it is we're now AD. Before December 20th, 2018, we were BC. We were working for the relegalization of industrial hemp for decades, effectively since 1970, when the Controlled Substances Act effectively made possessing a viable hemp seed and having a hemp plant in the ground illegal and a controlled substance. What happened on that day, when the Farm Bill was signed by President Trump, industrial hemp, for all purposes, as long as the cannabis sativa L measures less than 0.3% THC, and there's some nuances to that, it is off the schedule. It is not a criminal matter. Let's get rid of this language about it being a mafia thing, because it's legal. It should have never been illegal in the first place. But it is definitely not legal today. It's a civil matter. The DEA is out of the game. That is huge. It's paramount, and we have to understand that from all perspectives, because the various federal agencies will attempt to conflate it with marijuana, and that changed on December 20th, 2018. But what the bill effectively does is it calls upon the USDA to promulgate regulations, which we're waiting for, as well as for states to submit state plans to the USDA to be approved or denied, but to allow for the commercial scale production. And until that happens, we're still under the 2014 Farm Bill. And there's been a lot of reference to the fact that it needs to be for research. And it does have to have some tied to research. But we're talking about data collection and some extension to research. But the numbers are coming in. And this year, throughout the country, we have what I hear is about 515,000 acres that have been licensed or registered. Whether or not that's what's in the ground this year is another story, but my best guess is at least a couple 100,000 acres. It took, I don't know if Canada even has that number of acres, and they've been farming hemp since the late 90s. So that's just, it's huge progress. We're making progress at a very fast clip. And from someone who's been working on it for so long, it's super exciting to see. But other developments at the federal level are something significant that just happened this week is that the House passed the Safe Banking Act, and that applies to cannabis and gives safe harbor for banks to allow for cannabis-related transactions, and that's been extended to hemp, as it should be. But oftentimes, hemp gets a little bit of a, it's not quite as sexy as cannabis, and it gets a little bit of a short drift. But we've got a lot of advocates out there for hemp throughout the country. And it's an agricultural crop. It's an agricultural commodity. It's not a drug. It doesn't have THC, or in very limited matters. And therefore, it is going to steamroll past cannabis in terms of production in this country. There's also something called the Hemp for Victory Act that is moving through the legislature. Hopefully it'll get passed, and that'll allow for grants and further research and funding for this crop at a federal level. One more thing, and importantly, what's going on at the federal level is the FDA working to wrap its arms around CBD hemp products. As many of folks know, the FDA has taken the position, and our Department of Public Health has parroted this position as they are an extension of the FDA, that CBD is a prohibited food additive and dietary supplement. FDA's got the message that that the mandate is clear, that these products need to be allowed. That's an intention that's been directed by Congress through the Farm Bill to allow for these products. Cannabinoids are included in the definition of industrial hemp, and they're clear that they need to create a pathway for these products outside of FDA-approved drugs, and that is that is under process, and we'll get there. At the state level, we've got legislation moving, SB 153, that is helping to refine our ag code to conform it to the 2018 Farm Bill, as well as AB 228, which Niccolo referred to without referring to the name. It's attempting to resolve the hemp CBD issue at the state level. There were some provisions that were put into that legislation that would have allowed for industrial hemp to get into the cannabis retail market. I think we bit off more than we could chew, so to speak. Unfortunately, it got stalled out in appropriations, but the administration is committed to working with the industry to make this happen. This is a consumer safety issue, and hopefully come January, we'll be getting back on track and hopefully getting that passed early in the session as opposed to late in the session. But right now, SB 153 is sitting on the governor's desk. So what can everybody here do to support the efforts here in Imperial County is keep your eye on legislation at the state level, to follow what's going on at the local level, support organizations. The California Hemp Industries Association is just getting going. They had an inaugural meeting yesterday. Look into the California Hemp Council and really support what's going on in Sacramento with the Industrial Hemp Advisory Board work and the CDFA, together with our future partner in the CDPH.
Thank you very much. Quickly, as Patrick said, there's going to be another legislative proposal from Assemblywoman Aguiar Curry. This year she did AB 228. Supervisor Kelly in Imperial County was really, really helpful in pushing that forward. The governor's administration wanted to wrap their hands around that a little bit more. So look for that to come out hopefully in December. Working through the county, we could get all of you involved and organized. So that's just a quick plug on that. But then Josh, do you want to say a little bit more about what CDFA is doing and how folks here can interact with you?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Patrick, as usual, covered everything pretty well as far as what's going on legislatively. And, like everyone else, we're waiting to see what's in the federal regulations. And then at the same time, waiting for the governor to sign SB 153. So right now what we're working on is trying to get regulations in place to provide for consistent enforcement. That's really all our goal, is to try to be able to work with the commissioners and the growers to try to figure out a way to ensure compliance across the board and consistent enforcement. And so our staff are working on regulations. We have some regulations that were put into place earlier this year around sampling and testing that were done as emergency regulations. We're working on finishing that as a regular rulemaking and getting those into place permanently, while also keeping an eye on what's in Senate Bill 153 and making sure that we're able to move forward with implementing the provisions of that in a timely manner. Again, and still waiting for federal regulations. As with everything that's been with hemp for the last couple of years, everything is continually changing. And so we're, just like everyone else, trying to keep an eye on what those changes are and trying to incorporate them into what we do and working with the commissioners to make sure they're aware. Really, the bulk of what we're doing at the state level is trying to really work with the commissioners and making sure that we're working together across the board to get consistent implementation and enforcement in all of the 58 counties. And so that's really our main goal, is to try to work with the commissioners. One thing that is also going on at the national level I do want to quickly note is that a few years ago, I believe it was probably 2015 or 16, really the first two states that started working on hemp, which were Kentucky and Colorado, started a national effort amongst hemp regulators to try to bring everybody together and provide for a method for communication and harmonization. So through that effort, that's actually continued even outside of what's going on federally. The states are actually communicating and working together, and it's just everyone's all trying to work together to try and figure out where we're going and where we need to get to, so that way we're in a place to move forward for the next 50, 100 years.
Thank you very much. And now Carlos is going to add some words to this too.
Yes, as a Ag Commissioner, I am a member of the California Agricultural Commissioners and Sealers Association. That's the association that Joshua was referring to when the CDFA talks with the commissioners and meets with the commissioners and move along the program. The Ag Commissioners Association always follows legislation and makes comments to ensure that the end product is something that's enforceable and practical. One of our Ag Commissioners, Rick Rolla from Shasta County, sits on the Industrial Hemp Advisory Board. And the Ag Commissioner Association also has a Industrial Hemp Working Group. And I, as Imperial County Ag Commissioner, represent the South Area group in this working group.
Well, we follow the regulations of the state and the feds, and as they implement new laws, we look at them and see how we can modify ours to better suit the hemp industry.
Thank you very much. The second question blends a little bit into what we were just talking about. I was going to have Carlos speak first, and then Josh, feel free to chime in. So the second question is, what is the region and the state of California working on now as it relates to hemp, and what should the farming community be aware of? Thank you.
Okay, like we heard already, Senate Bill 153, it's in the governor's desk. The Ag Commissioner Association sent a letter of support to the governor. In the local level, I would like to really congratulate the local Farm Bureau. They went ahead and created Industrial Hemp Ad Hoc Committee, and they are meeting on a continuous basis, having dialogues and discussions on industrial hemp. And like it was mentioned before, Imperial County, with the help of the CO's office, County Council, Ag Commissioner's office, Sheriff's office, developed the industrial hemp transportation policy. The U.S. Border Patrol attended meetings. The policy was is being right now in a stage where we're developing the application form. It's a voluntary program. Once we get more details, it involves a final inspection by the Sheriff's Office. We'll meet with industry and the U.S. Border Patrol. So hopefully that can allow the U.S. Border Patrol to look at the shipments and do the inspection that they usually do with other trucks, with other ag commodities, and send them off their way in 20 minutes versus the loads having to stay there 2, 3, 4 hours because it takes them time to vet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Josh, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I think I kind of touched on this in the previous question, which is, the things that we're working on now are trying to get, regulations into place, working with the commissioners to determine what needs to go into that, working with them to figure out what they need to enforce the laws that we have. And so trying to work with them on, making sure that we've got all the forms and things like that in place, the basic structures of a regulatory program. That's a big part of what we're working on. And then very quickly, I wanted to touch on the question from the last panel, actually, that I thought was a really great question, one that unfortunately we really don't have an answer to right now, which is pests and diseases. We really don't know what pests and diseases are going to be impacting hemp and cannabis at this point. It's this kind of big black hole, and we're waiting for that shoe to drop. So that's something that we're actually proactively working with the commissioners on, is to try and get a handle of what pests and diseases are out there, figure out what's common. As anybody who's ever grown a crop knows, there are a lot of pests and diseases out there that can impact you, and those can be a much bigger impact than any of the other regulatory structures that we put into place. So we're working with the commissioners to try to get a handle on that. And unfortunately, we don't have an answer right now, but that's something that we're aware of, keeping an eye on, and trying to actively work on.
Thank you. And Patrick, I'm going to pass it to you.
So as they're working on pesticides and pesticide standards, one of the things that we recognized early on was the challenges that we were going to have and the farmers were going to have on seeds. And to the department's credit, they have really adopted a policy of not trying to unnecessarily restrict farmers' ability to get in and work with the seed. And even though the statute says, it really talks a lot about certified seed, the truth is that it's very limited, and that's where we're heading is working on certified seed. But there's a lot of challenges with that because a lot of the seed that's out there is for grain and for fiber and not necessarily for flour. And a lot of the flour, the seed that is being produced for flour, for smokable flour, for CBD oil production has come from marijuana strains. And so the real challenge is getting the THC to stay down, and whether or not we like a 0.3% THC standard, and there is really no scientific justification for that. It's pretty random. It probably ought to be more like 1%, but that's where we're at, and that's what we're stuck with. And it's a real challenge for farmers to make sure that they fall under that. There are some questions out there in terms of whether or not THCA needs to be included in those calculations. We're going to get some clarity from USDA on it. This is a big experiment. The process for testing is being worked out at the commissioner level. The THC is really rising in the last 30 days. And it's a real concern for farmers. This is your big issue. And we talk about that 0.3% standard, and if you go slightly above it, right now there's the statute says that it needs to be destroyed, and the Farm Bill says disposal. And I'd like to give a call out to Wayne Richmond, who's done a lot of work for the California Hemp Association, and he's brought this issue to our attention, and we want to work with the department on that issue and continue to drill down on the THC standards, and work with the regulators and with law enforcement, and point out the fact that even if it goes slightly above, that there's no criminal intent here. It does not necessarily render it marijuana, and so this is touchy, sensitive issues that are critically important to farmers that we need to continue to work with regulators on.
Thank you very much. Now our third question is going to go to Jim, and that is, what should property owners and farmers know about hemp regulations within Imperial County?
All right. Speaking from a land use perspective, we look at hemp in two categories: the cultivation and the manufacturing. Under cultivation, we classify hemp as we would any other ag product. So the county has over 500,000 acres of cultivated land. Hemp can be grown on all of it. There is no constraint from a land use perspective. With regards to manufacturing, currently hemp can be grown in either two places: our industrial zoned land, or with a conditional use permit in the heavy ag zone. We are, however, revising our codes to expand some of the industrial areas. So like right now, for example, we have 3 zones that allow production of products, semi-finished, finished products from industrial hemp. In October, we'll be going before the Board of Supervisors and requesting that be expanded to 6 additional zones. With regards to our policies and what we've done, as Supervisor Kelly mentioned, this all started with Prop 64. The county itself adopted the Cannabis and Industrial Hemp Ordinance in 2017. We went back in June of this year to revise it, to expand some of the operations to it for both the cannabis and industrial hemp. One of the things we did for industrial hemp was under state law, there's two different classifications for processing on volatile. There's a volatile solvent process, and there's a non-volatile. Our original ordinance only allowed for non-volatile solvents to be used in the manufacturing of hemp products, and in June the board approved the use of volatile solvents. So that's one of the major things we've been working on. We're also working with Carlos's office, as well as the fire department and environmental health.
I have a question for you on that. So
You're a panelist. You have to
yeah,
go
no,
down there.
I'm a moderator too. So on the point of permitting and licensing manufacturers, how are you working with the Department of Public Health on that at the state level, or is it you just dealing with at the local level and with any sort of guidance or supervision by the department?
No, we would be working with we have a local environmental health services health department. We go through them when we do a project like that, and then they of course address it at the state level.
Have any permits or licenses been issued yet?
No.
And when is that anticipated?
We have a couple inquiries so far, but we haven't had anything submitted to us at this point.
It's very exciting. You might be the first jurisdiction in the state to be doing this.
Well, we are, innovative.
It makes me very happy to see the intercommunication amongst panelists and the information sharing. I do want to highlight what Patrick said, that everyone in the county should be proud. The leadership and the foresight that county leaders and you all have, it's very, very impressive. I do statewide work up and down the state, and I don't think I've seen this level of forward thinking and organization, and that's for the elected leadership, the county, and for all of you out here. So I think you should be very, very proud of what you're doing and help take this momentum and continue to move forward, because as Patrick and I know from just working in the Capitol, some days are diamonds and other days are stones, but it's seeing kind of your foresight and your energy which keeps us going. Do any of the other panelists want to make any other comments about the last question?
Yes, I would like to add, my office is currently accepting applications. So even though IID may not be able to deliver water, I have heard that some growers, when they contact their seed supplier, in order for them to secure seed, they ask that they provide a copy of their state registration. So we have issued some state registrations based on that. There was a meeting several months ago to address cross-pollination. Industry was concerned that maybe it was an issue. So my office, along with the UC Cooperative Extension and California Crop Improvement Association, we got together and had a meeting with industry. And after we provided all the information and after a thorough discussion, knowing that cannabis in Imperial County has to be grown indoors, they decided that there was not a need right now to let industry just decide what they wanted to plant and look at it in the future if it becomes an issue. Regarding pesticides, the general rule of thumb is that there are no pesticides registered for cannabis. Well, for industrial hemp, it's a little bit different. In our table, in the Ag Commissioner's table, we have a handout that if you go to the Department of Pesticide Regulations website and just query pesticides registered for industrial hemp, you can get a list. So we have that. Like it has been mentioned before, this is a new crop, so obviously there's going to be new pests, new diseases. So my office in 2018 approached the CDFA and asked them, can we send a sample of industrial hemp that seems to have a disease that we're concerned of? And that was the first sample in the state that was accepted by the lab. So any grower that is currently growing at this time that feels that they have an exotic pest or exotic disease that is not common in Imperial County, we can go out and look at it and determine if there is a need to send it to the state lab and if there is, we'll go ahead and do that. Another thing we can do at this time, even though there's no need for sampling and testing, because if you're growing for research purposes, that's not a requirement. But if you plan in the future to grow on a commercial basis and already decided which lab you're going to use, let us know, give us information, and we'll vet it for you to make sure that it's certified to conduct industrial hemp THC testing.
I'd like to add one more thing. With regards to the IVC research agreement, our office is part of that circle. So Carlos is usually the starting point, or the CEO's office from the county, but we also we have to provide a letter that shows that that property is zoned properly. So we are involved in that aspect of the land use for the research. And as of right now, over 4,000 acres in the county has been signed off for the research agreements.
Thank you very much. And Jim, actually, if you can hold the mic, because this last question is going to start with you. We're going to work our way down. And then after this, if there's time, we'll take questions from the audience. To each panelist, what are some misconceptions of hemp that you would like to see clarified?
Obviously, the one on top of my list is the confusion where people from the community, maybe even from the press, confuse industrial hemp with cannabis. So I think we're at that point that everybody should have it clear in their mind that this is a different type of crop. It's being grown for a different reason. It has a lot of uses. And hopefully we can do the necessary outreach that everybody understands that.
I echo Carlos' statement.
Thank you. We're going to go to Patrick.
The effects of prohibition were substantial. And so much so that we've got the FDA and the Department of Public Health looking at the cannabinoids and saying, we don't know if they're safe. The World Health Organization has put out a 27-page report talking about the safety and efficacy and lack of abuse, potential for abuse on CBD. I mean, are they afraid of the actual reports and studies that have already gone on and have been put out showing that it's safe? It's absurd. The one thing we're talking about, also the next 5 years, and the one point I really wanted to hit home was in the early 2000s, what was driving. Well, let's see. Let me take a step back. In the 90s, it was textiles that were really driving the hemp industry in the United States. The United States is the biggest consumer of hemp products in the world. We've been, as consumers, we've been driving the economy. So in the 2000s, it shifted to foods. Towards the end of the 2000s, into the teens, it shifted to CBD and hemp oil. Whatever happened to the biomass and the rest of the plant? We've got several 100,000 acres that will be grown throughout the country, and all of that, what is going to happen to that biomass? In most cases, it's going to sit and it's going to go to waste. So what we see as advocates in the industry and as folks such as yourselves and entrepreneurs around the world, we're looking at ways to expedite the use of the biomass, the fiber, and the herd, and that's something that we need to put our collective heads together on, and we need to invest in that infrastructure, and we need to use all of the plant for all of its capabilities, because that's only going to come back and benefit the farmers.
Thank you. Josh?
Yeah. So one of the biggest issues for us, it's been very interesting working on hemp these last few years. And one of the things that we've noticed is that there's a couple things, which is one of it is that we have a lot of people who are not farmers who are looking to get into, they're very excited about hemp and they want to grow hemp and they're very excited to get into this new industry. And for people who aren't, and for anyone who is a farmer knows, there's a lot more than just getting a registration from the county ag commissioner that goes into farming. There's a lot of inputs, there's a lot of regulatory oversight and different agencies that you need to work with in order to be able to grow your crop. And it's wonderful actually being here today to see so many of them in the room. Not just on this panel, but the last panel. There are a lot of those contacts that you need to have growing crop. We at CDFA, we encourage us not to be the first point of contact for anyone who's growing something who has a question about something that we work on, because the counties are the boots on the ground. We like to say California's a little different than everybody else, than all the other states. One of the ways that we're really different from everyone else is that we're the only state where every county has its own agricultural commissioner and its own ag department. That's really unique. It makes it very complicated when we're working with other states. But it's a great resource. And so we always encourage people, go to your county ag commissioner's office, go to your local planning office, go to your local health official's office, and ask them, before you even go down the road of putting plants in the ground, really make sure that you have your questions answered and are working with them, because they're there to try to help you stay compliant and try to help you do what you need to do. And then the flip side of that is that we also have a lot of farmers that are now getting into hemp, and again, hemp is a little different. It's the only crop where it changes what crop it is based off of the chemical content, which is very unique. And so we've been working through that, and we appreciate everybody up here who's been working on that with us. But that's something that we encourage farmers to be aware of as we're getting into this new crop, that there are some differences and some different requirements, and we're all working through them together. So.
Thank you. And now I'm still going to leave the mic with you. What we're going to do is each panelist is just going to have one closing statement, or making sure we didn't leave anything on the table for you all to know about or be aware of. So we'll go down, starting with Josh. And then after that, if there's time, answer any questions from the public. So Josh, with that, any closing remarks you want to have, or make sure you didn't leave anything on the table?
Yeah, no, I think that was my closing comment was, we encourage everyone to talk to your local county officials. Stay in touch with your county agricultural commissioner's office, work with them. It's great to see so many of them here today. I even see some people from other counties here in the room today, so it's great, and it's also great just to see so much interest, and this is a wonderful turnout, so it's very nice, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think for the most part I covered all the bases. There'll be a kind of re-emphasizing something in particular, and it gets back to the processing and manufacturing of hemp, and the fact that while we've got the CDFA currently regulating the cultivation and farming of hemp, we don't have the Department of Public Health regulating hemp products as a food, or as a dietary supplement. And they don't want to do it, and it's going to take us, the citizens of the state of California, to push them to make that happen. So keep your eyes on the legislation, whatever that number is going to be. It was AB 228. It will be a different number come January, but reach out to your representatives and reach out to the governor and demand that this system get put in place, because it's a consumer safety issue, and these products are coming into the state, and allowing them to continue to come into the state without having our own products on the shelves is putting California farmers, producers, entrepreneurs, manufacturers at a disadvantage to the rest of the country.
Thank you. Carlos?
Yes, like we have heard already, a new crop's going to bring challenges. Challenges, what cultivar do I plant? California Crop Improvement Association, over the speakerphone, told the Farm Bureau, Industrial Hemp Ad Hoc Committee, plant the lowest one. This plant responds to the environment. We don't know what's going to happen. It could be a cultivar that tested in, let's say, Kings County at 0.25, but then in Imperial County it's 0.35. challenges on what crops are we going to rotate, what diseases, what pests are we going to encounter. But like we talked about, Imperial County has the land, has the water, has the research entities, but most important, has industry that has proven successful in other commodities. As an example, in 1977, in Imperial County, 143,000 acres of cotton were being grown. In 1980, 142,000 acres of wheat were grown. In 2017, 151,000 acres of alfalfa were grown. Yes, we're behind some states, but California is going to catch up, and Imperial County is going to be one of the counties in the front. Thank you.
Okay, just want to remind you all that the county is here, our departments are here, and we're at your disposal. Over to my left is the Ag Commissioner, wave. Except for Carlos, but he won't probably be there anyways. They're the workers. And then from there is the Air Pollution Control District. And to make you do a little bit of walking, on that side of the room, we have planning. Please raise your hand, planning. Environmental health and county fire. So we're here, we're at your disposal, and please come see us.
Thank you to all my fellow panelists. Really appreciate it. We're getting tight on time, so maybe if there's a question or two from the audience, happy to answer that. Other than that, really want to highlight what Jim said and what others have said. You've got a lot of great resources here all around. You know, get involved, stay in touch with our county leadership, with your elected leadership on what's going on. You know, the more voices, the better to helping push this forward. As Patrick said, you know, there's going to be bills next year that we really need to get to the governor and need them to take action. Thank Josh and his colleagues for all the work that CDFA is doing. You know, pat Carlos on the back for all of his work. So great resources here. With that said, we're going to wrap up unless there's any questions from the audience.
I have a question for Josh. Is CDFA planning in the future to have a system similar like a track and trace matrix, how they regulate cannabis, or something that is less strict?
So right now we don't have anything that we're working on. Right now we're waiting to see what the federal requirements end up being and what legislation ends up holding. So right now we don't have authority to implement something like that. But again, everything's continuing to change, so we're keeping an eye on things like that. But right now there are no plans. That might be a question for Patrick if he's got any insight.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I look to the Farm Bill to give guidance on that. What they set out were minimum standards that states need to meet, and that's really, there just needs to be a process in the state to make sure that what is leaving the farm qualifies with the THC limits. So rather than this sort of track and trace, it's going to be documentation moving with the hemp from the farm when it's being transported that includes your registration or whatever the entitlement was. Maybe it's an MOU, but hopefully it's a registration from CDFA that you are authorized to cultivate. And then all important is the certificate of analysis showing that it qualifies with the THC limits. With those two things, it can get into interstate commerce and it qualifies. The challenges, as I was alluding to earlier, on the THC side, if you're transporting just flower without the stem and the stalk, you'll get into concerns sampling and whatever the sampling and testing protocol is. I'm concerned. There's a lot of concern that if they just cherry pick the flower, it's going to be higher in THC than that homogenized sample, which under the sampling and testing protocols that the state has adopted. It's a whole plant standard. So and it's 5 separate plants from different parts of the field. So that's where I think the biggest concern is, to make sure that whatever you're transporting is going to meet the THC testing. That's what the track and trace is all about when it comes to hemp.
Okay, thank you.
And I'd just like to add a little bit to that. I think one common denominator, or there's been a few, but the panelists have all said a miscommunication or a misperception is cannabis and hemp. Having worked closely on the legislation that's now on hold, there are some segments of regulators that kind of see the similarities between cannabis and hemp. I will say track and trace has come up in discussions. I think that's an issue for a lot of us to work on, to make sure there's a clear delineation between hemp and cannabis.
But overall, we're trying to treat this as an agricultural crop and product and a commodity, not a drug, and that's a strong distinction. THC is the key here, and to move forward successfully with this industry, we can't be hamstrung by the THC types of rules and regulations, and they're seeing the problems with it, and they can deal with it. They can make those mistakes. We don't need to make those mistakes.
Do you think THCA would be included in the testing in the future?
It's included right now
It's included. Oh, okay.
under California's protocols.
What is the percentage on THCA, like the requirements?
So it's Josh can speak to this, but it's THC. It's Delta 9 plus THCA, and the conversion of THCA is at a lower. You lose a little bit when it's converted, so it's at a rate of 0.877%, so you're adding those two up, but I don't know if you want to speak to that.
No, I think you covered it. I did want to add something about the documentation point, though, because Patrick mentioned treating it as an agricultural crop. Anyone that grows and moves agricultural crops knows that there are documentation requirements already for any other crops. So, again, I want to emphasize working with the local agricultural commissioner's office on what it is that you're doing and where you're moving your product to, because no matter what it is that you're doing, even if you're growing lettuce, there are documentation requirements. So, if that's all that ends up being required for hemp, that's fine, but we still need to make sure that we're still meeting those basic agricultural crop requirements that we do for everything else as well.
Thank you.
About, 3 weeks ago, I had a processor of another crop, agricultural crop, big processor in the Fresno County area, call me and wanted me to come and visit him to talk about hemp farming, but they also are growers and processors, and he asked me what the license or what would be needed for him to move into the processing. I didn't know, and I sent that question on to CDFA, but listening to you, I think it should have been directed to the planning department, I guess, right? Is that the first step that they should go to get the legal or the correct?
Are you talking about processing or manufacturing?
Processing, extraction.
Okay, well, I would call that more manufacturing. Processing as being the after you harvest the hemp, drying it and handling it in that way, but manufacturing, extracting the oils, yeah?
Well, right now they have the capacity to do drying. They have an old dehydrator that they used to, dehydrate prunes, and they wanted to use that since it's in place for hemp.
Okay, so there's a good distinction between processing and manufacturing. A lot of times when we grow crops, we want to prep that crop before it leaves the county to be processed, to be manufactured later. So if I had a carrot operation, I'd want to wash my carrots before they went out, right? Or if I did algae, I'd want to dry it. So with regards to hemp, the chopping of the hemp, the drying of the hemp, that sort of stuff, as long as the plant is still basically a hemp plant, that all can be done within the zoning that's allowing you to cultivate the product. There's no special permit required for that other than like a building permit or electrical permit. However, if you're wanting to take that plant and manufacture something out of it, whether it's to create the CBD oil or rope or linen or anything like that, that's actually a manufacturing to a semi-finished or finished product that would require a industrial zone or a conditional use permit in a heavy ag zone. So you understand the distinction?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
But I'll comment from at the state level. What we're looking at and envisioning isn't quite the CUP process that they're envisioning here. It would be getting registered as a food manufacturing facility with the Department of Public Health. That's what they've done in Colorado. It's worked in Colorado. The FDA has stayed out of Colorado for the most part in terms of enforcement while they work on their regulations. So we're looking to that model. And yes, it would need to be, you need to be in the proper land use zone, but wouldn't need to get a CUP, at least at the state level. But that would be, an additional local requirement.
Yeah, thank all of you. That helps.
Great. Well, if there's no more questions, really appreciate everyone's time. Again, thank you to the sponsors for setting this up. And the panelists will be here, to answer any of your questions directly. And thank you, everyone.